Hey, Jamie, thanks for joining us today. For any of the business owners that are on watching the summit today that are not already familiar with you, can you give us a little bit of an introduction?
Yeah, it's great to be here. Appreciate you having me on. I was a college basketball coach for 18 years, and then I was a high school athletic director at a very large athletic department in Indiana, fifth largest high school gym in America. And so for 20 years, I was in college athletics, and then I left full time organized athletics, a full time job, normal paycheck, normal. Stability, and I went out on my own as an entrepreneur, and I'm now a full-time leadership trainer, team consultant, and professional speaker. And I've done that for just a little over a year now, full-time, after doing it a little bit part-time as a coach and athletic director. So it's been exciting and it's been fun and filled with challenges, but it's definitely been rewarding.
That's great. So, as a high level coach and an entrepreneur, you understand the wins and the challenges and the losses that a lot of us see in both of those situations. As a typical business owner who's going to face losses, challenges, big problems, how do you focus on the lesson there and not focus on wanting to put your head in the sand or hide from your family or get stressed out in those kind of situations?
Well, one of the reasons I left organized athletics, there was two reasons. One is my time wasn't my own. I was putting in a lot of time, but I was still almost handcuffed to the work. I didn't have the choices of when I wanted to work, and so I had to fit my family in at weird periods of time, certainly. And the other was I just felt like I could make a bigger impact going across the country, speaking. I could multiply my impact. And so when that came to the business part of it, I had to learn how to balance my time a little bit better, manage my life a little bit better. But in terms of like family, one of the things I did was I realized that owning your own small business or being an entrepreneur, you still work just as many hours or more hours. It's just you now told the hours. You essentially ordered the hours. You decided when your hours were. And so, I now get to see my son when I want to see him. It doesn't have to be, from 7 to 7:15 at night or something like that when I can fit him in. I go ahead and schedule what I need to be scheduled, when I need to be scheduled. And certainly in my job, it's a little easier to do that than some other people that might have their own small business if they have actual retail hours or if they have certain commitments. But, for the most part, I get to schedule my hours. Now, when I go on the road for a couple of days, that's a different story. But I make sure that when I come back, I have maybe 2 days fully where I can invest in myself or invest in my family.
Okay, I'm asking also more specifically, like if you lose a game or you lose a client as a
Yes.
business owner, in the face of those struggles, obviously there's always a lesson to be learned there. I'm sure both as a coach and as an entrepreneur, if you want to focus on that. So as a business owner that's probably already stressed out about payroll and cash flow and everything else, is there a good technique to say, hey, yeah, I lost a client, but out of that, I learned what kind of client I want, what kind of client wants to work with me, something along those lines.
Yeah, when when we were trying to build programs or build a culture in our athletic department or in my basketball team, we always had to keep the why in mind. Simon Sinek talks about know your why. You have to know your purpose. You have to have a clarity of purpose. And that really helps you both in the highs and the lows. When you have the highs, when you have a great week where you just book a whole bunch of clients, you don't get too cocky. And you also don't just go for the money. And when things are bad, you don't just take on any clients and you don't get depressed because you understand what your purpose is. You understand what it is, what your vision is, what your long term is. And a lot of times you see coaches, we watch athletics all the time, sports on TV all the time, and we see coaches that fail. And a lot of times when they fail, it's because they lost sight of what it is that was most important to them and what it is that their long-term goal was. They sacrificed a long-term for a short-term now. And business owners, myself included, we can fall into that trap. But when we do face those obstacles, it helps to have either a sign up in your office or maybe on your email signature, there's kind of a vision statement, or a quote or something that you have that constantly reminds you of what it is that you're actually doing and why it is that you're in it, and realizing that you have confidence in yourself and realize you have confidence in that vision. And so you just persevere through those times. And it's difficult, but that's why if you can write it out, or if you have people around you, surround yourself with a good team, whether it's a couple assistants, whether it's partners, whatever it is, you have a good team around you that can help pick you up when things are not looking so good, and keep you grounded when things do pick up, when things are going really well, that you don't get a little too big for your britches.
Yeah, that's that. I've had a few of those experiences myself, so I understand that. So let's go with that a little bit. If you have this vision, it absolutely makes it easier for the harder days to keep focused. A lot of people, I find, have a hard time coming up with that vision. We're in a society now where being selfish or self-centered or thinking about what you want is almost frowned upon. We're also in a society now where there's distractions every 5 seconds, so people aren't really always that good about saying, this is what I'm working towards. This is what I really want 5 years from now, or 10 years from now, or for my life. If you're one of those people, and like I said, I find a lot of people like that, especially in the business world. How do you figure out what your vision should be? How do you find something that you're passionate enough about that when your business hits you in the head 5 times in the same week, you're like, yeah, but I'm still really excited about what I'm working towards?
Well, most people that go into their own business are entrepreneurs. They have a passion for something. Now, they might not know what they want it to look like 5 years from now all the times, or they might not know the specifics, but they know what they really want, whether it's freedom, whether it's a lot of money, whether it's I only want to work 2 days a week, or I want to be really famous, whatever it is. I want to impact people. I want to make a difference in the world. Most people know on a broader sense what it is. And once you know that, then all it takes is a little bit of taking time out to put that on paper, or to actually write out a plan, get your plan in place. And most people don't do that. What most people do is they keep go, 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 and then they go, go, go some more. And, Abraham Lincoln once said, if I had 6 hours to cut down a tree, I'd spend the first 4 hours sharpening the blade. And most of us don't do that. Most of us don't figure out what our plan should be. And then we certainly don't reevaluate our plan if it's not working, or even if it is working. Sometimes the best time to reevaluate what's going on is when things are going well. So whether it's going well or going bad, we should constantly find times to reevaluate. And that just might be putting it in our schedule. Okay, the first of every month, June 1st, July 1st, whatever it is, I'm going to spend that day working on my plan for the next year. What it is, am I going to reevaluate, or for the next quarter or the next month, whatever it is. But maybe set aside 1 day, or set aside 2 hours a week, whatever it is, but schedule that in, that's reevaluation time, because most of us don't do that. And then what happens is we fall behind the curve. We keep doing the same things that we've always done. And then eventually what we do is we lose momentum, or we fall behind the curve. And especially when it comes to social media, especially when it comes to technology, we have got to keep up with that stuff. We can't keep doing what we did 2 years ago that was popular. And BlackBerry, people with Blackberries, or people with MySpace accounts, or those kind of things, or even now, if you don't know I deal with a lot of students, let's say. I deal with a lot of students. If I'm not talking about the latest, greatest social media things that they're using, if I'm still talking only Facebook, a lot of students aren't using Facebook right now. So if I'm only talking about that, or if I don't even know what Whisper is, if I don't know what the newest, greatest things are, then I'm losing out, and I'm losing respect of those customers or those people that I'm getting in front of.
One quick follow-up question. So you talked about how a lot of business owners in a broader sense know what they're after. Do you think it's important to get specific on that, so that when you do reevaluate, you can measure and figure out? So freedom, say you're saying time freedom. Do we need to take some time to get down and say, this is what time freedom looks like to me, like I'm able to do X, Y, and Z? Or do you think, I'm chasing time freedom is enough of a mantra for someone to stay motivated and be able to reassess?
Yeah, for me, I wanted freedom, but it wasn't so that I didn't work 8 hours or 12 hours a day. It was so that, well, I'll give you a story. I was an athletic director and I got permission to go work out at the YMCA every day from 12 to 1:30. Well, there was 2 days in a row, two different people at the YMCA. They both said to me, "Aren't you supposed to be in school right now? Or aren't you supposed to be working right now?" Well, the thing is, I was working 12, 13, 14-hour days every single day. I was there, early in the morning, late at night for games and that kind of stuff. And I'd gotten permission for an hour and a half off. But the problem wasn't that I was working so much. It was that I was being told when I had to work. And the perception was you had to work at a certain time. A lot of us have 9 to 5 jobs that we can get the job done if we only had a 10 to 2 job. A lot of us struggle with that freedom. We want some freedom, not so that we work less, but so that we can take off to go see our kids' ball game. So we can take off to just take a day if we need it once in a while. And so we do have to evaluate what it is that's most important. And if the freedom is important to us, what does that look like? Is it freedom to work less hours or freedom just to do more if something came up? So, for instance, this morning, I had a pretty booked schedule. Okay. But I did that so this afternoon I can go do what I need to do with my son. If I work a full-time job, I can't do that. Other days I'll work 10 or 12 hours. But I have the freedom and I've scheduled that in. I can schedule in my son or I can schedule in my wife or I can schedule in to go work out, that kind of stuff. But I think if you put it on paper, maybe list what it is that's most important. What does that look like for me? What are the obstacles that are getting in the way of that or have gotten in the way of that in the past? And what are my solutions to that or what are my answers to that? And how can I achieve what it is that I want? So if it's freedom or money, what it is that's holding me back from that. And a lot of times we'll know what's holding us back. The solution's a little harder, but it depends what that ultimate goal is that we want. For my case, it was freedom. I wanted more freedom in my life. I didn't necessarily need more money, though that's always good. But I wanted more freedom so that I could go work out or I could go to my kid's ball game and not have to answer questions. Why are you doing this?
Perfect. Yeah, I think sometimes for a lot of people, even just putting down the problem of the current situation is pretty difficult. I remember the first time I worked with a coach, and I was like, "Here's what I want," and she was like, "What does that look like?" And that was really challenging for me. That's why I asked the question because, I was like, well, I want freedom. And she was like, well, what does that mean? Like, are you going on a certain number of vacations a year? Do you have a certain number of time? Or do you only work a certain number of hours? And she was like, if you don't write that down, then you never know if you got there. And I was like, oh, that's a pretty good point. And to your point, I think a lot of people miss out on that putting it down on paper so that, like you said, once a month, if you go reevaluate, like, hey, am I a little closer to that or am I not a little closer to that? Because otherwise, in that month, your picture of freedom might have changed a little bit.
Well, and a lot of times, and I had to learn this, honestly, this was probably one of the biggest challenges I had when I went from organized athletics or a job to what I'm doing now, is that I liked the freedom and I took it a little bit for granted to start with. And I had to reevaluate. I had one of those sessions where I reevaluated what I'd been doing for the last month. And I realized, you know what? I wasn't working anywhere close to the hours that I should have been working. And I kind of was living like I was retired. I was kind of living like I was on vacation and only in that this was a hobby. And you still really have to put in 6, 7, 8, 9 hour days sometimes. It's just that one day you might not put in that, or you might take the whole day off. You have that freedom to do that, but you still probably should have, if you work on your own, you should probably have an office space where you can get away from your kids, get away from a wife, get away from just the daily grind. And you want to schedule in your office hours. If you're used to working a 9 to 5, you should still be working a 9 to 5. It's just you can have the freedom to take off if you need to. And that was the first month that I was on my own. I didn't do that very well. And now I'm doing it much better. Now I've scheduled my time. I'm still having office hours. I'm still going into the office. My son Jalen knows that daddy's going to the office. It's just I don't have to leave home to go to the office.
Yeah, and I think that's important. A lot of people, I think they do one or the other. Either they work 16 hours a day or they, like you said, in the beginning, it's like, hey, I can do whatever I want. And there's a Robert Kiyosaki quote, I think, that I like, and he says, if you run your business like a hobby, it's going to pay you like a hobby. And most of us know our hobbies are expensive; they're not paying us. So, to your point, I think that's great. So I think we've done a pretty good job of defining our vision for our business and for ourselves. So let's take that over to branding a little bit. I know you talked about personal brand in some of your content. How important is it now to have a personal brand, and how important is it, if at all, for your personal brand to be aligned with your company brand?
Yeah, honestly, I think that they shouldn't be compartmentalized for the most part. Even if you don't have a personal brand, like you're the CEO of a company, it's hard to differentiate you from that company. And so I think our brand, whatever it is, our company or our business is, our small business, our entrepreneurial vision, it's hard to separate that from our brand. And so I think it's vastly important to have a brand and to stay on brand in terms of what it is that you want. So for instance, on Twitter, on Facebook, I don't get involved in politics. I don't get involved in talking too much about the game last night or what I think the game's going to be tomorrow on TV. I try to stay on brand, which is providing value to people from a leadership standpoint, a character standpoint, providing motivation, and letting people know that I'm available, my services are available, and what it is that I can add. So I try not to engage too much in trivial things because that's not my brand. Now, whether that's right or wrong, it seems to work for me because a lot of people will tell me, hey, I really liked your encouraging message, or I like that tweet that you sent out, or I like following you on Twitter or whatever it is. And I don't think that if I was, once in a while I'll drop a University of Michigan football tweet in there because it's in my blood and I'm a season ticket holder. But outside of that, I try not to put out things that are going to be polarizing, that are going to turn people off. Not so that I can please everybody, but just my brand. My brand is to be a motivational speaker, to add value to people, and to build people up and empower people. And I don't think that's on brand. I don't get in with CNN or Fox News or get embroiled in controversy too much. I try not to, at least. So yeah, I think the brand and you and your business you don't really compartmentalize and separate those.
Well, I think you made a good point because some people will tell you to polarize and some people will tell you not to. But what works for you well is because your brand is built around helping as many people as possible, it doesn't pay for you to polarize. For some people it does because their brand is built around having notoriety or working with a certain segment. So I think the most important thing is be true to yourself with your personal brand. And if it's your business, it's probably naturally going to complement that as long as you are. So I think those are all great points.
Yeah, if I was a controversial, if I was a really in-your-face type speaker and being very sarcastic and very biting and almost a comedian or
I'm very sarcastic. That's why I looked at her.
Then that would be staying on brand. Now, some of my players might have thought I was sarcastic at one point in my career, but I try not to do that. That's not what I think builds people up and makes people better. But I have thought at times, man, I wish I was controversial because I would get a whole lot more followers and I would get a whole lot more attention. But I just don't think that adds to what I'm trying to put out there.
No, and if that's not you, again, if that's not you, that's not who's going to connect with you. If you're naturally that person, I think you can be that. But, if that's not, then I think you're true to yourself and it's perfect. What you're doing is exactly what you should be doing. So let's take a little bit of a shift because obviously you have a lot of knowledge and experience with managing teams. And that translates to business owners managing teams. What are a few key ways to keep our employees or our teams motivated, especially for a small business owner that a lot of times is just caught up in that overwhelm or, like I said, making payroll or a lot of times they're too caught up in their own stuff and they kind of expect their teams to figure things out on their own. So if we want to keep a happy team that's kind of cohesive, what are a few tips we can pass on that people need to keep in mind?
Well, the very first tip that comes to mind is also the hardest. So I'll start with the toughest one. And that is you have to connect with your team members. And you have to acknowledge that you don't know it all, but you have to connect with them. As a coach, there is no question that, coaches today say kids won't run through a wall or kids these days or players these days or whatever. But the issue is people will do stuff for those that they know, like, and trust. If you've made a connection with people, then your team members, your employees, whoever it is around you is going to be willing to do more. They're going to be willing to they're going to be motivated more. They might be willing to work a little bit more overtime. They might be able to be more willing to do a project that they don't like. They might dog cuss you out a little bit less, or they might criticize you in the break room a little bit less, or they might give you one extra day as opposed to getting you on the same day and criticizing you. If you don't make a connection with them, and what happens sometimes is business owners or leaders sometimes maybe got there because they're good at systems or processes, or they're really, really smart. And what happens is sometimes they're the smartest people in the room. Sometimes they have a way of doing things, or they think that this is the right way to do things, or this is the way because this is how I would do it. But they have to take into account what their team members are like and what makes their team members tick. And most of us can't do much if we don't have a team around us. We can do a lot more with a team. And I think back to when I was a high school student walking down the sidewalk with my mom. Okay. And we had to cross over to the street, and I didn't want to wait for the crosswalk. So I just started to go out in the road, and she grabbed my arm. Jamie, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm crossing the street. She goes, yeah, but cars are coming. I said, Mom, I got this. No problem. Pedestrians have the right of way. And I'll remember to this day, she said, yes, and you'll be dead right. And I remember that to this day. And I wish I've done that 100% of my life. And I haven't. I've fallen short at times. But sometimes being the smartest guy in the room, sometimes being right doesn't get a win. Sometimes you have to have wisdom. Sometimes we can be the smartest person. We're smarter than our employees, but you know what? Our employees have a lot more to add in this situation than we might. They might see things from a different perspective. And I know you asked for a number of tips. If I could, like a church sermon, if I could leave you with nothing else today, if you're not connecting with your team, whether it's a virtual assistant or whether, in the Philippines, or whether you have 10 to 15 people working with you, if you're not connecting with them, then you're not getting the most out of them, and they're not going to be as motivated to work for you. And they need to know, like, and trust you. So if I had to pick process or people, I would always choose people. But the other tip that came to mind when talking about, leading a team, is related, but let people do their jobs. Let people do their jobs. You can't do it all. You might be really good at everything, but you can't do it all. And in fact, most of the time, there's somebody that's better than you at something. The best CEOs, the best leaders understand where their strengths and weaknesses are, and they find people that complement them. I was the same way. My staff as a coach, I had people around me that could do the things that either I couldn't do or I didn't want to do. And as a business owner, you better get people around you that can do what you can't do or don't want to do, because it has to get done. And then let them do their job. Don't micromanage them to the point where they have no enjoyment anymore working with you. And I like to say working with you as opposed to working for you, because as a leader, if you take that approach that people are working with you, then you're gonna be a lot farther ahead. And trying to motivate them, inspire them, and get them to dream big, because that's what you want. You want them to have ownership in your company. I know, Sean, this is your company. Brittany has to feel like she's a part of the company, or else she's going to be looking for a way out, or she's not going to give it her all. If you don't have team members that are bought in and have invested and have ownership, then your company is not going to reach its potential, or your team's not going to reach its potential. So you want to try to be partners as much as possible. Ultimately, there has to be a chief. There has to be someone making decisions. Well, we know who's the real boss is sometimes, but ultimately someone has to make decisions. But you want it to be as collaborative and partnership as much as possible, because then when the company is doing well, everyone feels good. And when the company is doing bad or poorly, then every team member is trying to figure out how to make things better, as opposed to them just pointing at the boss and saying, well, it's his problem now.
So I do have a follow-up for that. modern times, connecting with multi-generational employees. My 21-year-old employee might get offended if I don't connect with them on Snapchat, where my 50-year-old employee might think it's weird that I Facebook friend requested them. And, the same way, if I had a house party and didn't invite my 50-year-old employee to my barbecue, they might be like, what's wrong with me? And my 22-year-old would be like, why would I want to come to your house? Like, you could have sent me a video of it. How do we address some of those issues? And especially to me, my question would be the inequity. Like, how do we keep people from thinking like, hey, oh yeah, we're totally Facebook friends, and then you feel left out, but it wouldn't work the other way around. How do we address some of those kind of issues? Because connecting with people is not what it used to be. There's a lot of differences we have to consider,
That is a great question. My answer, once again, is not a good answer in terms of a leader might not like it, but you have to work harder and you have to work smarter at it. The old days of there's one way to do things or everyone's going to fall in line with the way I've done it, those rules don't apply anymore. That doesn't mean that things are worse than they used to be or better than they used to be. It's just different. And so you as the leader or as the boss or the CEO, whatever role you have, it's your job to make things work. And so you have to figure out how it is you're going to relate to that 21-year-old. You also have to understand how you're going to relate to the 51-year-old. And it's going to be different and it's going to be more work. Now, you might actually have to communicate with that 21-year-old of why you're not doing something with them that you might be doing with the 51-year-old or vice versa. You might have to communicate. And when you do communicate, you're going to have to communicate in the method that they want to be communicated in. So you might just need to text the 21-year-old and or nowadays just tweet them. You might have to tweet at the 21-year-old to let them know or send them an Instagram picture with some text on it, letting them know why it is that you're doing something. And with the 51-year-old, you might have to write them a letter and actually put a stamp on it and actually lick the envelope. But you have to figure out what they want and then try to fulfill that in a way that they feel like they've connected to you. And that's a lot of work, especially when you do have multi-generational people in your business. But the main point kind of all that is millennials, Generation Z, baby boomers, Generation X, it doesn't matter who you're working with, they're not the enemy. Every generation that comes after the generation is always the worst generation ever, according to the generation that came before it. So I was terrible in the eyes of a baby boomer. And you know what? Millennials are terrible in the eyes of a Generation Xer. And holy cow, Generation Zers are the end, I guess. That's the end of the world. Who knows what's going to happen with them? They're taking us, who knows? But that's not the case. It's not worse. It's just different. And you have to adapt to things. And if we're not willing to adapt, once again, going back to what I talked about with technology and social media, if you're not willing to adapt, then you're going to struggle to achieve your potential in your business.
Yeah, I think that's true with all things, but especially with communication these days. So we probably have time to sneak in one last question. You've obviously had experience recruiting. I've seen you write articles on interview techniques for a person going for a job. What's one thing we need to remember now if we're the ones doing the interviewing? Again, we're going to have people with different communication backgrounds and styles, and certain things that we would have thought were totally inappropriate are not going to seem totally inappropriate to some of these younger generations. So the most important thing when I'm interviewing a new employee right now?
Well, the very first thing is you got to know what you want, know what your vision is, know what your purpose is, and know what kind of team member you're looking for. There's a great author named John Gordon. He has 2 books that talk about this. One is The Energy Bus, getting the right people on the bus. And the second one is Soup, getting the right ingredients in your soup. Okay. You have to know what it is that you stand for, what's your core values. And then that's what you're looking for in an employee or a future team member, because it's certainly easier to hire the right person than it is to get rid of the wrong person. And it's certainly as easier to hire the right person than it is to train the wrong person. So you want to find the right people. And the way I like to do that is you can ask questions and you can ask tough questions and all that kind of stuff. I like the peripheral. If you're able to do that in your interview in the business that you're in, I like the going out to lunch with another team member. I like spending time with them with another team member, not just me as the boss, because they're always going to be on their A game with me, or they're going to tell me what they think I want to hear. But if they go out with an assistant, if they go out with another team member for drinks, if they go out just, if they're coming in the night before and staying at a hotel, you have a couple team members meet them in the lobby that night. Those kind of things where they kind of let their guard down and your team members start to see what that person really is like. Because your culture, you might cast the vision for your culture, but it's your team members that actually live that out and implement your culture. And so if you've done a good job of establishing your culture with your team members, then they're going to be able to identify that in future team members. So I like that even above the normal traditional interview session, because they're going to be on their game. And especially if I've worked with them on interviews, they're going to really be on their game. I'm going to help them give the right answers and do the interview well. But it's when your guard is let down and you're not on your A game, that's when you really see what a person is and whether or not that's a person to contribute more to your culture or not.
That's great advice. Thank you. And I think we're pretty much out of time. So this has been great.
Okay.
Lots of great information, great conversation. I appreciate it. Anyone that wants to follow up with you, keep a conversation going with you, where would you like us to send them?
Absolutely. My website is jamybechler.com. They can follow me on social media. At Twitter is my main one, at Coach Bechler. But those are the two main places, and they can get my contact information there as well.
Perfect. Well, thanks again for joining us today. I'm sure all the business owners here got a lot out of this, and we will talk to you soon.
Excellent. Thanks, Sean and Brittany.
Thanks, Amy.
Bye.